For as long as I could remember, my family believed there were only two respectable careers in life: medicine and teaching medicine. Everything else was simply settling for less. My grandfather had been a renowned heart surgeon. My grandmother was a pediatrician. My father became the chief of surgery at one of the largest hospitals in the state. My mother was an accomplished neurologist. Even my younger sister, Emily, seemed destined to follow the family tradition. By the time she graduated high school, she had already won national science competitions and been accepted into one of the country's top medical schools. Then there was me. My name is Nathan Carter, and I was the family's greatest disappointment. Not because I struggled in school. I graduated near the top of my class. Not because I lacked ambition. I worked harder than most people I knew. The problem was much simpler. I didn't want to become a doctor. From the time I was 12 years old, I loved designing and building things. While my classmates played video games, I spent weekends in my grandfather's old garage turning scrap wood into furniture. I repaired broken bicycles for neighborhood kids. I built bookshelves, tables, and even a treehouse for a family friend. Creating something with my hands made me happier than anything else. When I told my parents I wanted to study architecture instead of medicine, the room became completely silent. Dad slowly removed his glasses. "I hope you're joking." "I'm not." Mom looked genuinely confused. "You're throwing away an incredible future." "No. I'm choosing the future I actually want." Dad folded his arms. "Our family has dedicated generations to saving lives. I respect that. But it isn't my dream." His expression hardened. "You'll regret this." Maybe he believed he was protecting me. Maybe he truly thought he knew what was best. But in that moment, all I heard was disappointment. Over the next several months, every conversation became an argument. At breakfast, at dinner, during family gatherings, relatives joined in. My uncle laughed. "So you want to draw buildings instead of saving people?" A cousin added. "Maybe medical school was too difficult." Everyone chuckled. I smiled politely. Inside, each comment hurt more than I admitted. Only one person supported me. My grandfather. Late one evening, he found me working in his garage. Without saying a word, he watched me finish restoring an old wooden rocking chair. When I was done, he smiled. "You know, your hands remind me of my father's." I thought he was a doctor too. Grandpa laughed. "No, he was a carpenter. He built homes for 40 years. He taught me that creating something lasting is another way of serving people." I looked surprised. I never knew that. Most of the family doesn't. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let anyone convince you that dignity belongs to only one profession." Those words stayed with me. Despite the constant pressure, I enrolled in architecture school. The day I moved into my small apartment near campus, neither of my parents came to help. Only Grandpa arrived. He carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs despite being nearly 75 years old. Before leaving, he handed me an old measuring tape. It belonged to my father. "Build something that makes people feel safe." I will. Architecture school wasn't easy. I worked nights at a hardware store to pay tuition. Sometimes I survived on instant noodles for weeks. While classmates traveled during holidays, I accepted construction jobs to earn extra money. Every dollar mattered. Meanwhile, I heard very little from home. Birthday cards stopped arriving. Holiday invitations disappeared. Family group photos appeared online without me. At first, I told myself everyone simply needed time. Then one afternoon, my mother finally called. For a moment, I thought things had changed. Instead, she asked one question. "So, are you ready to quit pretending and apply to medical school?" I quietly answered, "No." She sighed. "Then don't expect us to support a decision we believe is destroying your future." The call lasted less than 3 minutes. It would be the last conversation we had for almost a decade. Years passed. I graduated with honors. Started working for a small architectural firm. Learned from talented mentors. Eventually opened my own studio, specializing in affordable community housing. I wasn't interested in skyscrapers. I wanted to design schools, libraries, clinics, and homes where ordinary families could build better lives. Slowly, my reputation grew. Projects won regional awards. Cities invited my firm to submit proposals. Our designs focused on beauty, accessibility, and sustainability instead of unnecessary luxury. Life wasn't perfect. I missed birthdays, Christmas mornings, family celebrations. I wondered whether Emily ever thought about calling. Whether Mom ever regretted what happened. Whether Dad ever looked at old family photographs. Then, Exactly 9 years after I left home, an elegant white envelope arrived at my office. I almost threw it away, assuming it was another business invitation. Instead, I froze when I saw the handwriting. It belonged to my mother. Inside was a wedding invitation. Emily was getting married. At the bottom of the card, one handwritten sentence caught my attention. Your sister wants you there. I stared at those words for several minutes. 9 years of silence. 9 years without birthdays. Without phone calls. Without a single apology. And now they wanted me to attend the wedding. I had no idea whether I would be welcomed or merely tolerated. But one thing was certain. Walking into that wedding would be the first time I had stood in the same room as my family in nearly a decade. And before the reception ended, my mother's unexpected words would change everything I thought I knew about why they had let me go. For almost an hour, I sat in my office staring at the wedding invitation. 9 years. That was how long it had been since I had spoken to my parents face to face. 9 birthdays. 9 Christmases. 9 years of wondering whether they ever thought about picking up the phone. Part of me wanted to throw the invitation away. Another part remembered my little sister. Emily had been only 19 when everything happened. She hadn't been the one who told me to leave. She had simply been too young to stop it. After several sleepless nights, I made my decision. I would attend. Not because I expected reconciliation, but because Emily deserved to have her brother at her wedding. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden overlooking a quiet lake. Rows of white chairs lined a flower-covered aisle. As I stepped from my car, I noticed several relatives staring. Some whispered. Others looked genuinely surprised. It can't be Nathan. I thought he moved overseas. I haven't seen him in years. I smiled politely and continued walking. Nothing had really changed. People still enjoyed talking before asking questions. A few minutes later, Emily spotted me. For a second, she simply stood there. Then she ran toward me. Tears streamed down her face before she reached me. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. You came. Of course I did. I've missed you every single day. I missed you too. Neither of us noticed the guests quietly watching. Emily stepped back and smiled through her tears. I wrote to Mom every year asking her to call you. I looked surprised. You did. She nodded. She never told you? I shook my head. No. Emily looked confused. I thought. She stopped speaking. Someone called her to prepare for the ceremony. Before leaving, she squeezed my hand. Please don't leave after the wedding. I need you to stay. I promise. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Watching my little sister walk down the aisle filled me with pride. Despite everything our family had been through, she looked genuinely happy. After the vows, guests gathered inside the reception hall. I stayed near the back, speaking quietly with a few cousins. Then I noticed my mother walking toward me. 9 years had changed both of us. There was more gray in her hair, more lines around her eyes. She stopped only a few feet away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, You look just like your grandfather. I smiled faintly. I've been told that. Her eyes filled with tears. Then she said the words I never expected to hear. I was wrong. The room around us seemed to disappear. She took a slow breath. For 9 years, I told myself I was protecting our family's legacy. But all I really protected was my own pride. I remained silent. She continued, When you chose architecture, I thought you were rejecting everything your father and I had worked for. I couldn't see that you were simply following your own calling. Her voice trembled. I lost my son because I couldn't accept that his dream looked different from mine. At that moment, my father quietly walked over. He looked older than I remembered. Not weaker, just tired. He looked directly into my eyes. I owe you an apology too. I confused obedience with respect. I believed a good son always followed the same path. I never stopped to ask whether that path was yours. For several seconds, none of us spoke. Then Dad reached into his jacket pocket. He unfolded a worn newspaper clipping. It showed one of my community housing projects receiving a National Design Award. The paper was creased from being opened many times. I've carried this for almost 3 years. I looked at him, surprised. You knew? He nodded. I've known about every project, every award, every interview. I asked friends at the university to keep me informed. Why didn't you call? His shoulders lowered. Because every year that passed made it harder. I kept thinking I'd apologize tomorrow. Then tomorrow became another year. My mother quietly wiped away tears. We watched your success from a distance. We celebrated in private. But we were too ashamed to admit how wrong we had been. At that moment, Emily joined us. She looked from mom to dad to me. Please. No more lost years. The four of us stood together in silence before embracing for the first time in nearly a decade. Several relatives quietly wiped away tears. Later that evening, during the reception, Emily surprised everyone by inviting me to give a toast. I wasn't prepared, but I stood anyway. Looking around the room, I smiled. When I was younger, I believed families were supposed to agree on everything. I've learned something different. Families don't stay strong because they always agree. They stay strong because they're willing to admit when they're wrong and courageous enough to forgive. I looked toward my parents. We all made mistakes. I made one too. I let silence last longer than it should have. Mom shook her head. No, we were the parents. The first step should have been ours. I smiled. Maybe. But today we're all taking it together. The room filled with applause. Months later, my parents visited one of the affordable housing communities my firm had designed. Families filled the playground. Children rode bicycles through safe streets. Neighbors gathered beneath shaded parks. My father slowly looked around. I spent my career helping people survive. He smiled at me. You've spent years helping them live. Those words meant more to me than any award I had ever received. Looking back, people often remembered the dramatic reunion at my sister's wedding. But that wasn't the most important part of the story. The real turning point came when my mother found the courage to say 4 simple words. I was wrong, Nathan. Those words couldn't erase 9 years of silence. They couldn't return missed birthdays or family holidays. But they opened a door that pride had kept closed for far too long. And sometimes, healing doesn't begin with grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with one honest apology and the willingness to walk through that door together.